thanks to the Kirby Laing Center and the Center for Hebraic Thought for convening this event, and to all members of the symposium for taking time to read and comment on my book, and to all members of the audience for joining today. I don't think in my long life there's ever been an event like this in which people have actually taken the trouble and made the effort to read and then give me the benefit of their reactions and thoughts. And to have gained such a biblically learned and religiously engaged group of people as my readers is a great and most unexpected blessing. And I really have no words to adequately express my gratitude. So I'm just really overwhelmed by the fact of this event. And I thank you more than I can possibly say. A man who's written 605 pages and 95 pages of notes has probably said more than enough. And I couldn't possibly, in a few brief minutes, do justice to very much of what's in there, but perhaps a few introductory remarks about the purpose and spirit of the book, and maybe a couple of things that I've found in it that will sort of feed into the larger discussion to which I'm very much looking forward. Why did I write this book? Well, in the first instance, it's a sequel to the commentary on Genesis, and I really wanted to find out what happened. I spent 20 years teaching Genesis to undergraduates and graduates at the University of Chicago. We went line by line, 20 weeks, 4 hours a week, barely finishing Genesis. I wanted to find out how the sons of Israel, newly arrived in Egypt, become the people of Israel. But because I read in a wisdom-seeking way, I read this text not only as a singular historical account of a particular people, but for the light it might shed on certain enduring questions of human life. And in the beginning, for me, these were the questions born out of political philosophy, the questions of what makes a people, what forms their common identity, what holds them together, to what guides their lives, to what do they look up, and for what should they strive. I read the book in a very unusual spirit, and the first thing to say about it, maybe not for this audience, but in most places, very unusual. I read this as a book. That is to say, not in terms of its sources, and not as the traditional Jewish readers read it for its excerpted halachic obligations, but I read it as a coherent literary whole with an unfolding teaching that is also coherent, and written also as most books would be written, with a certain attention to its effects on the readers. It is written in part designed for us. Unlike many people who today will read the Bible to learn about it, and I'm speaking mostly of academics rather than people on this Zoom meeting, I am not interested in learning about it so much as learning from it, and submitting in a way to the text, suspending whatever disbeliefs one has, and try to let the book show you how it wants to be read, and to show you its themes, its interests, its teachings, preferably unmediated by the extraneous concepts and questions that I bring to it. And I wasn't, by the way, reared on this book. I was reared in a Yiddish-speaking secular Jewish home, proudly Jewish, but with no knowledge of the Bible at all. And I really got into this through having to teach a course of our own design on human being and citizen, and these texts just got a hold of me, and I've been on a journey with them ever since, still unfinished. I think the new thing, in addition to the distinction between learning about and learning from, is to learn to live with the text and to allow the book to work on me. In other words, to pay attention to the deed of the book as it's expressed in this particular reader and in my fellow readers. In other words, not only reading for what it says, but read for what it does to the mind and the heart of the readers. And I do this in most courses that I teach, and I teach great books classes, or at least I did. And I would always say on the first day of class, we're going to read this book as if it might just contain the most important truth you need to know, which you might not find otherwise unless you submitted to this book and allowed yourself to learn from it. And this I tell my students at the beginning of every course, including the beginning of the Genesis and Exodus class. And I'm happy to report that it finally happened to me. And in the remainder of these opening remarks, just a few minutes more, I want to say something about how that happened and where. What did I learn from the book that was surprising? The main thing is that the foundation of the Israelite nation rests really on three pillars, and they correspond to the three parts of the book of Exodus. First, the shared experience and lasting memory of oppressive slavery in prosperous Egypt and the astonishing deliverance, the story of which becomes an obligation for these children of Israel, an obligation imposed upon them before they even go out of Egypt. So they're commanded to tell the story of an event not yet happened. So that one of the features of this people is a shared narrative of deliverance and the gratitude that they owe for it. Second, a comprehensive covenantal law governing all aspects of life, featuring constraint, encouragement, and uplift. And at the center of it, for me, the surprising thing was to discover the unique and central importance of the two positive teachings of the Decalogue, the teaching to remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy and honor your father and mother, the sanctification of time of life, the introduction of reverence into the household. I don't want to go into anything further now, but to see the centrality of these uniquely Israelite teachings, both of which fundamental to the endurance of this nation against all odds for 3,000 years. And then finally, the tabernacle, the place of worship, the embodiment of the human aspiration to be in touch with what is highest. Those are the three pillars of a political founding. But what I didn't pay attention to sufficiently in the early years of reading this was that this is correlated with an increasing disclosure and revelation of the Lord God of Israel, who makes it very clear at the outset his desire to be known by human beings. The whole plagues in Egypt are given so that the Egyptians shall know that I am the Lord, and knowledge comes to them in their last speech when they drown in the sea of reeds. It's too late. The Lord fights for them using the tetragrammaton name for God. It's the last thing you hear out of the mouth of the Egyptians. As they go down, they acknowledge, and through their acknowledgments, the Israelites actually come better to know the Lord. We learn about the Lord God of Israel from his deeds, particularly in the first part, his care, his compassion, his deliverance, his solicitude in the desert. We learn about him from the law, to lift up the creature made in his image, to provide sacred time in imitation of his own standing down from the creation, and certain sacred distance into the household, which unsanctified can become a seedbed of tragedy and a den of iniquity. And especially in the tabernacle, to be known and experienced in the day-to-day life of his creature, in a place of his design, containing the law that he gave, following the rituals he prescribed. The sentence that I never paid any attention to during the longest time, that I used to regard the tabernacle as a kind of concession to human weakness, the weakness that's expressed at the golden calf, a certain desire for merging, a certain wildness of the soul. But when God says that he took up with Israel so that he might abide in their midst and that they would come to know him, that one begins to see the tabernacle not just as a concession to human weakness, but as a completion of the project of the creation. The references to the creation story in the last part of the discussion of the tabernacle the references are legion. And there's a certain sense that only with the tabernacle, only when the Lord has a certain presence recognized in the day-to-day life of his creature, is the whole enterprise of the creation brought, at least in principle, to completion. The practice falls far short. There's more failure than there is success, but at least a certain kind of vision in which God himself is somehow, if one may say so, completed by being known and experienced by his creatures in a place that he set out for him. That was an astonishing thing for me to read, and to some extent, partly the time of my life and new synagogue experiences, to have the sense that of the truth of this account, and to be able to say this to a group of serious Christian scholars and students of the Bible who probably know this better than I do from long experience is just a blessing. So thank you very much. I look forward to the conversation and to hear what you've made of this, and I'm all ears.